everyone, and welcome to the Future Ready Librarian podcast series, Leading from the Library. I am thrilled today to welcome my dear friend Sylvie to the show, and I have been looking forward to this just all week. So welcome.
Hey, Shannon, thanks for having me on the Future Ready Librarians podcast. I'm psyched to share a little bit about how I'm leading from the library.
Oh, I can't wait. So just first, tell everybody where you're at and what your job is, and maybe a little bit about, I always find everybody's background kind of interesting also.
Sure. So I'm Sylvie Shaffer. I'm the pre-K through 8th grade librarian at the Capitol Hill Day School, which is an independent school in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill. This is my 4th year at the school, and prior to that, I was at another independent school locally for 4 years, and prior to that, I was at a charter school in Northeast DC for 5 years. So been at it a while, and every year has been different, and I just know that every year I'm going to learn new stuff and try to apply it and let go of old stuff that's not working anymore and just keep rolling with it. I love my job. I feel very privileged to be able to love what I do.
Yeah, you have a lot of great experience, and it's been fun over the years to watch you as you go to different places and all the things that you're doing that are so awesome. And even just you, like, as a reader and librarian and as a mother, like, I just love it. And I think that one thing, when I wanted you to come on the show, I knew that there were a lot of things that we could chat about. But when I asked Sylvie right before we started recording what she wanted to talk about, I was really thrilled because I know all of you are going to love what we're going to talk about too. So tell us what we're going to chat about today, my friend.
I wanted to talk about the power of print because I get a little nervous and a little sad sometimes when I see conversations about future ready librarianship that misunderstand or only share part of the picture of what future ready librarianship is all about. And I feel like sometimes we can get stuck in a little bit of a thinking pattern around future ready librarianship, meaning only electronic resources, or being a lot about coding, maker spaces, databases, digital literacy, and all that stuff is so important, absolutely. But the starting place for me has always been and always will be print. And helping kids navigate informational books is a really big part of our jobs as librarians. And so many of the skills that are embedded in working with print actually make kids better searchers when they go to apply those same thinking skills to digital resources, electronic resources. So yeah, let's talk about print.
Yeah, let's talk about print. And, one thing too, and we had you on a summit, and I love just hearing like what you were doing in the library through the pandemic and how things have changed. And one thing that I'm curious about too is, I know for me, like, I've had so many huge ahas through all of this. And I'm just like wondering, like, is this something too that as you look at things differently and you've seen your kids, like when we were at home reading online or working with our kids online, like if that has changed too. So that's something we can talk about too.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, and I love that kids have been reading online so much. And one of those ahas that ties into the power of print thing is there is nothing that compares to the page turn of a picture book. And when I have kids when I will hold up a book and they'll say, oh, I read that on Epic. It's a totally different experience reading something electronically than it is reading it in print. When I'm holding a picture book up in front of a group of students, even if they've read it before, and I always remind kids, even if they've read a book before, every time we come to a book, we're different. Every time we're reading a story, even if we've read it 10 times before, if we're reading it in community, then it's a different experience because we have the perspectives of the other people in the room. We always have new background knowledge We have new connections, new ideas. So books are always fresh, but that aha that connects to the power of print, it's really, for me, it's about, we approach books differently than we approach ebooks. And I love sharing print nonfiction texts as an entry point for some of those digital navigation skills that we'll introduce later. So can I share an example from a lesson this week?
Yes, I was just going to ask you, like, share
Yeah.
an example.
So one of the things that's super special about my school, and I'm sure many other schools as well, is the way that our specialists, including library and art and music and all that, all the specials, we try to be really intentional about how we dovetail our curriculum with what's happening in the classrooms, and thinking kind of longer term about spiraling skills and spiraling knowledge. So my second graders right now, this moment, are on a field trip to the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens, which is a beautiful, beautiful site right here in DC. And they're looking at the lily pads, and they're observing the frogs, and they're looking at the trees, and things are starting to change. And the reason they're doing this is a couple things. So in second grade, we have a big unit about biomes and studying biomes. And then in art, they're getting to do some observational drawing that connects to that. And so what I've done, knowing that they have this field trip today coming up, I was like, okay, let me see what I've got in a collection, and let me see what's new. And I think probably most people are going to be accessing this audio, but I brought over the picture because it's so gorgeous. Do you know this book, Shannon?
No, I'm getting my
Animal
pen out.
Architects. Animal Architects. The author is Amy Cherix, and it's illustrated by Chris Sasaki. It is so special. So we read this one last week, and it is all about how different animals create homes for themselves in different biomes. And so we had read this one last week, and even just, and I know that a lot of people are going to do this in audio, but I'll try to talk through it.
Yes.
Even the end papers here, they have sort of a blueprint motif on them. And so I held it up. I said, what do you think? I showed them the end papers before I showed them the covers. Sneaky. So I showed them the end papers. I said, what do you see here? What does this remind you of? And kids were making connections to the different images that are here. There's a seashell, there's an oak leaf. But a kid said, oh, you know, my uncle, I don't know, his uncle, whatever, someone he knew was an architect. And he's like, those look like blueprints. And I was like, oh, they do. What great connection. What are blueprints? We talked about that. And then so we started reading the book, which, oh my God, these illustrations. I wish this was a video podcast. But anyway, so we read this book, which is so lyrical, so beautiful, and it's narrative nonfiction. We're talking about it. So at the end of the book, I'm introducing back matter, right? Introducing the idea of back matter. We talked about how there are selected sources, and we talked about what that means, like if you want to know more, but then also introducing, these are second graders, right? Introducing the concepts of both, the author had to tell us where they got their information, right? They didn't just know all of it. So introducing the idea of citations, introducing how we can track our research and, well, where did you know that? And being able to like double check on stuff, right? Super important. So that was last week's lesson. This week's lesson, and I don't have the book with me because I sent it on the field trip with the art teachers. But this week, I read them just yesterday, Over and Under the Pond. Do you know that one by Kate Messner, part of that series? Fantastic narrative nonfiction. So we read that book. They're able then to activate prior knowledge from this book that we read the week before, make those connections, start to like figure out what are some of the keywords that they might be using. We talked about that. We get to the end of that book. That book has tremendous back matter in it, including it lists all the animals that appear in the book that are over and under the pond, right? The way that the author had, an illustrator had them organized in the back of the book, though, is very interesting. I asked the kids, rather than telling them, how did the author, and we didn't read every one of them. I read them a couple samples, right? They really want to know about moose. So we read the moose one. they noticed right away that the organizational design of that, the way that they had ordered those animals, was the order that they appear in the book, right? So then we had this fantastic conversation. What are some other ways they could have chosen to group those or to present those, and why, right? And the why, of course, is like the right? So these kids are so brilliant. Second grade, beginning of the year, mind you, they have not really been in school kind of ever for any sustained period of time because of the pandemic. Shan, I was so proud of them. They were like, oh, they could do them in alphabetical order. They could do them by size. They could do them by food chain order. I love that answer.
Yeah.
They could do them by mammals together, insects together, reptiles together. So what are they doing? They are doing classification work. They are figuring out how to organize information. And if that's not future ready, I don't know what is. Did we look at a database? No, not yet. We might, a couple months, right? Did we write any code about it? Did we do anything that lit up, made a noise, sparkled? No. Did we get the Cricut out? No. Did we 3D print anything? No. Was it future ready? Yeah, for sure. It was future ready. And so I just feel like when we do introduce database searching, they're going to be able to apply that thinking. They're going to think, how did the person who built this database organize this information, right? Same thing when we're looking at other nonfiction books that are maybe a little bit longer than a picture book, and they have navigational tools in them like an index, a table of contents, learning how to use things, the guide words at the top of the page of a dictionary, thinking about the print navigation that we are, I hope, all of us teaching kids to do as part of our library lessons, as part of information literacy, is going to help them figure out how to find what they're looking for down the road. Does that make sense?
Total sense. And I'm so happy though that you're talking about this, because I think so many times we get caught up and we miss some of those skills that, like, I think sometimes about like how we learned things, and how just those, like I had a mom who was a teacher, and even thinking about how she shared books with me when my sister and I were little, and how we learned, and even just sitting like with my own kids and talking about them. And I always hope that they, had people that took the time to really like take apart something like that, like you've done, which is totally brilliant. I love it. And really tie into then what we want them to learn when it comes to like our digital resources, because they're never going to forget that experience. Like those are the things that they're going to remember, and they're going to remember that time that you took. I'm so glad that you're talking about this. It's something, and it totally is future ready. Like these are things that are core to us as librarians and as teachers, and then we want them to be to our kids too.
For sure. For sure.
I mean,
I think you can't approach teaching how to Google effectively if the kids don't have a baseline understanding of how indexing works. You can't expect them to be able to pull keywords out of thin air unless you look at a print index together of a book that has a very simple concept that they already know. And then they're able, it's like, I don't know if these serve well in your library, but my kids are obsessed right now with cookbooks and baking, and they love all of the like decorating cupcakes books. And so I'll see a kid like flipping through the pages looking for that one cupcake recipe, and I'm like, hey kid, do you know what you're looking for? Oh yeah, I'm looking for the chocolate one with the marshmallow. I was like, oh, this book has an index. And then we flip to the index together, and I'm just like, oh wow, I didn't know that every chocolate cupcake was listed under the keyword chocolate in the index. And it's just like brain explosion.
And those skills are things that and it's also a great thing with those skills to tie into like how we collaborate with the teachers, right? When we
For
can
sure.
come and we can say, like, it's not just all these things that we do with technology or all these things that we do with coding or whatever it might be, but just those skills that we really want to embed into our curriculum. And we do the same thing at Van Meter, where our related arts, we really try to tie in closely to what's happening within the classroom. And I think that that too is so future ready when it comes to that collaboration piece of being, future ready librarians, but supporting that curriculum in that way is genius. I love it.
I mean, I pulled it straight from the Future Ready framework. It's if you look at those cogs, all those pieces are there. We just tend to focus you have to look at it's holistic, just in the same way that as a progressive teacher in a progressive ed school, I look at the whole kid. I'm really trying to look at the whole framework and not get stuck on just one or two pieces of it.
Well, and I think too, we always remember that like literacy is right in the center, and that is the core of, I think, not only why we're teachers, but why we're librarians. And those are the things that, finding those great books like that new Animal Architects, which I cannot wait to get. And I think that's important too, that collection development piece, but finding those two that is really going to tie into the curriculum nicely. One of my favorite parts, right, of being a librarian.
For sure. Same. Absolutely.
Oh, I love it. This was so inspiring, and people are going to take this. And before we started recording, we were just talking about like you've been booked and some other ideas. And I think when we're listening to something like a podcast or sitting down and talking and like taking that little nugget, and this will be, what they listen to this day, and they'll take it back to their library. And so I really appreciate you sharing that example and your knowledge, like always, my friend.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I'd love to hear from anybody about how they're doing these things in their library as well.
Yeah, tell everyone how they can find you online.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Sylvie_Shaffer on Twitter, and also the same handle on Insta. And I've been doing some TikToking. So you can find me at Sylvie in the Library on TikTok. And yeah, it's really fun. I love TikTok. It's great. I learned so much from all the book talkers and all the kidlit folks. And it's also been really, since I'm a talker and I tend to yammer, especially when I'm excited about something like books, having a 60-second format has really helped me try to figure out like, okay, what's the gut of what I'm trying to communicate in this 60 seconds? So yeah, excellent.
I love your little TikToks. They're so good. So
Thank you. Thank you.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And I can't wait to talk to you again. And I know everybody will take this and be so inspired. And so thanks to our listeners, and a big thanks to Follett, our sponsors. Thank you for joining us for the Future Ready Librarian podcast, Leading from the Library. I would like to also thank our sponsor, Follett Learning, for their amazing continued support.